Hey friends.
What's up?
Okay, we're about to talk about plant reproduction.
Yep.
This is plants reproduce in a variety of ways. We're going to focus on sexual reproduction.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Dun, 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 dun,
You need to go get a note guide and then mute her.
The best part of this presentation.
So here's a short little 2-minute video on plant reproduction. It's going to give you like a preview of what we're going to talk about. So watch this and then we'll go through the nitty-gritty details.
Flower reproduction. Flower reproduction is a process that requires a male and a female sex cell. The process of reproduction can be broken into two parts: pollination and then fertilization. Pollination is the movement of pollen into the pistil. Pollen is the male reproductive cell and can be found on the stamen of flowers. Pollen must be moved from the stamen to the female part. The female part is called the pistil. The flower depends on pollinators to help with this movement. The honeybee is the most well-known pollinator. Bees are attracted to the bright colors of flowers. Bees are also attracted to the sweet nectar that flowers produce. As the bee flies from flower to flower, grains of pollen get stuck to the bee. Sometimes a grain of pollen falls off and lands on the female part of the flower. Other pollinators are birds, wind, or even water. Once the pollen lands on the pistil, the plant has been pollinated. The next step is fertilization. The joining of the reproductive cells happens when the pollen grows a tube down the female part and meets with the egg. Genetic material from the pollen and the egg combine. The development of a seed begins. If conditions are favorable, the newly developed seed will grow into an adult plant. Flower reproduction can be summarized as pollination, followed by fertilization. Plant reproduction.
Okay guys, so we're going to go and talk about more about each part of the plant and how that pollination, fertilization, and one more word, germination, how all those processes happen.
Okay, so we're going to start out by talking about the reproductive organs of the flower, okay? And we kind of touched on this a little bit when we talked about sexual reproduction, about how not all sexual reproduction occurs due to sex. It just means that there's two different reproductive organs that need to be available in order to produce an offspring.
Yep. And flowers are those reproductive organs from most plants or many plants.
Yep.
All right, so let's look at the female section first, because girls are the best, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the pistil is the female part of the flower. And what we have on the drawn on the bottom is just a generic flower. Different plants do arrange themselves differently, so sometimes the pistils are in a different location. This is just a generic flower. So the pistil is the female part that includes a stigma, which is the top, the style, and then the ovaries at the bottom. You're like, dude, I have ovaries, if you're a girl. And I'm like, yes, you do. They call ovaries in a woman and ovaries in a flower both ovaries because they hold the egg. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the three little bullets underneath, the stigma is usually the top, and it's pretty sticky because we want to trap the pollen.
So think about like those lint rollers. If you've ever used like the lint rollers that then pick up all the lint, they hold on to it.
And the style is the tube that heads down to the ovary, which contains the ovule. The ovules. That's how you say it.
And that's what I would go with. Okay, so just like we just said that there's a female part, we know there has to be a male part. So the male part of the flower is what we call the stamen, okay? And the stamen has two parts to it. It has the anther, which is the very top of that long portion there. And then it has the filament, okay? So the anther is the part that you saw in that video that actually carries all the pollen. So it's kind of it's the holding cell for that pollen, okay? A lot of times these are yellow in color, not always, but generally the color is yellow. And the anther then is kind of like the stem, the filament is the stem for the anther then. So the filament is that small structure that holds the anther up high. Which you want the anther up high because if bees are picking up that pollen, you don't want the anther real far down into the flower or the bees would never get to it.
Easy access. I like how stamen has the word min in it. Stamen is min, and that is the male part. So think stamen, that's the male part. And here's a nitty-gritty detail. That pollen, that will fertilize the egg. What fertilizes animal eggs? Correct, sperm. In the pollen grain, each little bitty white dot are 2 sperm that will then hopefully fertilize, one of those sperms will fertilize the egg. So when you are allergic to pollen, guess what you're really allergic to? Plant sperm. Plants have it.
Yep.
Kinda, now that you know they have it, it's kind of gross, huh? Okay, so pollination. That's the act where you transfer a mature pollen grain from the anther to the stigma. And then we listed some pollinators.
So the different ways that pollination happens, it can happen through wind, which we had some pretty brutal windstorms the last couple of days here in St. Louis. Insects, so things outside of, it can be honeybees, but there's other insects as well that travel from.
Butterflies, caterpillars.
Yep. And then other birds and animals. So you have like hummingbirds.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And just pay attention in the definition there, how it says the mature pollen grains. Just because a flower has pollen doesn't necessarily mean that those pollen particles are ready to fertilize an egg.
Okay, so this is how it works. First, the pollen moves from the anthers to the stigma at the top of the pistil, and it probably uses a pollinator to help it move, like the bee legs catches it and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then it needs to go down from the stigma. It's going to go down the style to the ovary.
Okay, so then you have a sperm cell that fertilizes the eggs, the ovals, which are, is that how we're saying it?
I think so.
Okay, which are inside the ovary. So the ovals are the individual eggs though, okay? And then the goal is that fertilized egg grows into a seed.
Yep.
Okay, so then once that seed...
it's my favorite part.
Okay, so do you want to say it?
No, you can say it. I'm just so excited.
So once the ovary becomes a seed, then there's a seed pod, okay, that forms around...
the egg becomes a seed.
the egg becomes a seed, and then it has a seed pod that forms around it.
From the ovary! So when you eat fruit, guess what you're eating from the plant? It's ovary. So when your mom is munching on an apple, say, hey mom, how does that plant ovary taste? See how that works.
Tell them what you told me about the raspberries today too.
Oh,
the blackberries.
I just learned this. Blackberries and I think raspberries would be the same. Those each, the blackberries have like little bumps all over it. Each one of those is a ovary. Is that crazy?
So plant ovaries taste really good.
Yeah.
Or some of them do.
Some of them do. I don't like raspberries.
I do.
Think of other plants too that have seeds inside, because the ovary does hold the seeds. So tomatoes, that's why they're fruit. You might have heard this before. I hear it on TV every now and then. Tomatoes are fruit because they're holding the seeds, which were eggs. So that's the enlarged ovary of a plant. Peppers, enlarged ovary of a plant. Pumpkins, enlarged ovary of the plant. So technically,
apples?
Those are all fruits. And apple, we know that one's a fruit.
Yeah, but I mean that outside portion is the
isn't that cool?
Seed pod around the seed.
So some things we call vegetables really technically, by science definitions, are fruits. They just don't taste good. Like peppers, nasty.
So think of it kind of like the ovary is forming this protective area around the seed. So it's kind of like how human moms have the baby inside of them, protecting that baby until it grows into its own person.
And then when do bears eat fruit?
Yeah.
Let's pretend bears eat fruit.
Berries.
So if a bear gets a berry, pump, 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 they eat the seeds. They can't digest the seeds. The seeds are protected. They're usually hard casing. So when you pass them through the system.
That means you poop them out.
Yep, you poop them out. Then those seeds are ready to be planted. So that's why we have this fruit is actually a dispersal method. So as you eat watermelon, you spit out the seeds. One summer we did this as kids. We spit out all the watermelon seeds. We had watermelons taken over my dad's garden. He was not impressed with us, let me tell you.
That's funny.
But it was a way to disperse those seeds because we were just like spitting them at each other. Okay, here's some fruit formation. So you can see in the bottom the ovaries in the ovals are fertilized. And then just the fruit grows around it from where the flower was.
Yep.
If you ever picked apples, you might notice that they were once the fruit.
Okay, so here are some things about sexual reproduction. Okay, so most flowering plants cannot fertilize themselves, meaning that one flower does not have what is needed in order to reproduce.
And there's two reasons for that. There might be their pollen is so far away from their pistil, because sometimes they're in separate structures of the plant. Sometimes the stigma, the thing on top, has a chemical that blocks its own pollen. So even though the pollen touches it, and you think it should pollinize it, it doesn't because it chemically blocks it. It doesn't allow it to pollinate itself.
Mm-hmm. So that kind of leads us right into the next one, which is that some flowers only have male parts and some only have female parts, which then means that they obviously cannot fertilize themselves. Okay. Okay. And then,
talked about that already.
Yeah, plants need help to fertilize their eggs. We already kind of touched on that. The cool thing of that Miss Mills mentioned about the, some of the stamens not allowing their own pollen to attach there. It's kind of like making sure that they can't inbreed, so that their genetics are far enough apart that the flowers they're producing don't come up with any type of genetic problems. It's the same thing with animals and human beings. You don't want the genetics to be too close to your own because it causes a lot of problems with offspring. So
you want diversity, or you could get mutations. Okay, after the seed has landed in the ground somehow, there's this thing called germination, and that's when the seed actually develops into a little bitty embryo and actually grows a new plant. So you've probably done this in elementary school. You probably planted some beans in a little cup of soil, and you've probably seen a little bean sprout grow. So that's germination, that process there.
So that's kind of the last step.
To have a brand new plant. All right, so here's what we want to do.
So this is kind of color by labels, okay? So it tells you the part, and then it tells you what color to color it. So you need to complete the picture below. And it's always nice to match up your part with a color because it really helps in memorizing those parts. There is a portion of your brain that really likes to match color with words to improve your memory of them.
Yep. Okay, kids.
That's it.
That's it. If you have any questions about plants, call us.
Or email us.
Yeah.
Don't text us, though.
Yeah, definitely not texting. Okay, see you later, guys.